Well, Chloe Cole is one of the world's most prominent victims of LGBTIQA+ gender fluid ideology. She's visiting Australia to talk to politicians and the public about the dangers of gender transition. Her story of starting on puberty blockers at 13, tragically having her breasts surgically removed at 15, and then detransitioning at 17 is a story everyone needs to hear as they see rainbow flags wave throughout our cities and in all of our public places. I'm pleased to say that Chloe has made some time out of her busy schedule, travelling around our nation to join us to speak to us here on ADH TV. Chloe, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Chloe, you're only 19 now. A lot's happened to you in the last 6 or 7 years. As a 12-year-old, what was influencing you when you thought that you might be a boy trapped in a girl's body?
So I learned about transgender ideology through the internet, through social media platforms, mainly through Instagram. It was communities of other kids who were quite like me. These were kids who had body image issues, who had difficult home situations, who were bullied and a bit socially awkward. And I felt like I really related to these people, and like it gave me sort of an answer for my own problems in relation to my body, the discomfort that came with going through puberty, especially so young, and with being a tomboyish, awkward girl.
Mm. So what did your parents say to you at the time when you told them you thought you were a boy?
So they were conflicted because they wanted to help me through these feelings, and they wanted to help to be as supportive as me as possible without really pushing me any particular direction. And they didn't really want me to actually undertake the permanence of especially a medical transition. And they wanted to just allow me to dress and present myself however I wanted without really jumping into any risky decisions. But the doctors um, really coerced my mom and dad into going down the medical route with me. They were told that I understood what I wanted. It didn't matter how young that I was, because this trans identity was something that was innate, something that needed to be medicalized. And if I wasn't given that, if they denied that, then they were told that I could be at risk of suicide.
Right, so
So
they played the suicide card with your parents to help convince them that you should first start taking puberty blockers at 13 and then ultimately progress to surgery.
yeah, and they played that card every single step of the way, while talking about the medical aspects of it, the blockers and the testosterone, and then eventually again when I was going through the consultations for surgery at 15.
Hmm. So in Australia, and I know in many states in America, we have these conversion therapy ban bills. We've got them in Queensland, the ACT and Victoria. The Victorian one's the most extreme. It will put parents and doctors and counsellors in jail for up to 10 years if they try and stop a child from going down the path that you've gone down. What would you say to the politicians who support these sort of gay conversion therapy bans?
So my home state of California actually has that same, a very similar bill written, um, or similar law actually, that prevents healthcare providers from providing any sort of exploratory therapy. Anything other than the affirmative care model could be considered trying to convert a patient or child out of their transgender identity. And this is dangerous. So it leads to outcomes like mine, where patients and children and young men and women are only affirmed in their identity and led further down into the pipeline of the affirmative model. Whereas we could be exploring the underlying psychological issues that are causing the gender dysphoria and addressing that rather than jumping straight into transition.
Yeah. I read that you've given your testimony many times before parliamentary or congressional, state legislatures, these sort of committees investigating the transgender issues. But your first endocrinologist actually tried to talk you out of this, but you went and got a second opinion, didn't you?
I mean, so that first endocrinologist didn't push back against my identity. It was more, he said that the rationale was that I wasn't socially transitioned enough,
Mm.
which, I mean, that could mean anything. I mean, this entire premise is based on stereotypes around the sexes. So it could have been something as simple as, well, maybe her hair isn't cut short enough. Maybe she's not wearing like a boyish enough T-shirt or something like that. And he said about a year's difference, I could come back. But when my mom and dad went back to the psychologist who referred us to that endocrinologist, she immediately referred us out to another endocrinologist again.
Okay, so it wasn't a case of one endocrinologist being against transitioning the child, it was just a case of timing. But it seems like the medical profession all the way through were pretty gung-ho, to use an Australian expression. They were pretty enthusiastic about sending you down this path.
Very much so. I mean, there really was no talking with me about some of the underlying feelings of discomfort around my body, of being awkward as a tomboyish girl, of not really fitting in with my peers and wanting to feel that sort of acceptance from the people around me and from my own self. There really was no questioning of any of this,
Yep.
of any of the sexual trauma that I had been through. Of me possibly being autistic or my learning disability playing into these feelings.
Okay, so you had some underlying issues, and this, of course, is well known that many, particularly girls who are disproportionately represented in gender transitioning, often have underlying issues. You obviously had some of those yourself. Was that considered as part of the medical discussions that you and your parents had with health professionals?
No, I mean, my mom and dad and I would talk to the psychologist about all of this, and it was to the doctors. It seemed almost as if it was just completely unrelated, that it was coincidental, or these struggles were caused because of my incongruence with my sex.